He's here. He's going to talk to us about Madden NFL 2011 iPad. Broke this year. Broke with unit sales and revenue records. That was the first game. That was the first game on iTunes to simultaneously hold the #1 position on both the games chart and all applications chart. So, exceptional. Congratulations. This critically acclaimed game has been receiving consistent 8 out of 10 or higher reviews. That is no small feat. And in his discussion today, Wolfgang will be disclosing some joys and challenges of bringing an established franchise to a new hardware platform. So that's interesting because I think there's a lot of people with questions about that. So looking forward to your discussion.
Thank you. Mic going? Can everybody hear me out there? Great. Well, thanks for coming. I'm going to take a bit of a poll. How many of you are students? Whoa! How many of you are not students? Great. And of those people who are not students, are you working in the industry right now? Just raise your hands. And those of you who are in the industry but would like to work in the industry, raise your hands. Great stuff. Well, the wonderful thing about this conference is that it allows everybody to meet and to get to know each other and to share ideas and so on and so forth. So we're going to go pretty quick here, so I'm going to go through these slides fairly quickly. If you'd like a copy of this presentation, please send me an email. You can send it to Wolfgang@koolhausgames.com. If you'd like my business card, please come up afterwards. I'll be happy to give it to you. And also at the end of the session, if you have more questions, we'll have a period at the end for Q&A. By all means, come on up afterwards, and I'll be happy to talk to you for however long you'd like to discuss whatever you'd like to ask me. So here's the program. I'm going to talk about Madden and our experience. We were one of the first developers on iPad, which was an interesting challenge. And along that way, I'm going to also talk about a process that we use at Koolhaus called the critical stage analysis process, which definitely helped move the hurdles along throughout the whole process. And also, we're going to have time for Q&A at the end. So here's what this session is and what this session is not. What it is basically a general overview of the development process of that particular game. What it is not is we are not going to get into today into in-depth code, design, sound, so on and so forth, art for that particular project. But if you have questions in that regard, by all means, either email me or come up afterwards. So first of all, a little bit about Koolhaus, because this is my first time here in London, and perhaps a lot of you don't know Koolhaus Games. It was founded in 2004. We are in Vancouver, BC. And previously I worked at EA on NHL hockey as well as Radical. And while I was at Radical, I worked on Simpsons Hit and Run. And about that time that I was making the decision to leave Radical, I was also teaching part-time at a college called CDIS, which is now the Arts Institute. And some of my students heard that I was leaving. And they came up to me in my class one day and said, "Wolfgang, we hear you're leaving Radical, and we'd like to talk to you about that." And so I said, "Okay, let's meet." And they said, "Come to such and such a classroom next week on Tuesday," or whatever it was. So I walked in this classroom, and lo and behold, there were 23 students there, to my surprise. And so they all said, "Well, we're thinking of starting a company, and here's our vision for the company. What's yours?" And I said, "Well, here's my vision for the company." And they said, "We like your vision better. Can we join yours?" And that's basically how Koolhaus got started, was with 23 students from CDIS. Along the way, some students, programming computer science students at SFU joined up, and SFU gave us some space up there at SFU, and from there everything has evolved. It's quite an interesting way that Koolhaus has developed, and it demonstrates that there's no defined way to start a company. If you have a passion for it, and if you find other people who share your vision, then go for it. We had no money to start with, none whatsoever, no capital. And we've been in business for 6 years. So along the way, we've attracted other experienced people, and right now we're pretty much a mix of experienced people and new people who graduated from universities and colleges, so on and so forth. And the people that we have attracted have won a whole bunch of awards, as you can see up there along the way. So here's some of the games that we've developed over the 5+ years. Some of them self-published, some of them for other publishers across different platforms, console, mobile, iOS, so on and so forth. And I'm going to show you a short video here, a very short video of our clips of some of our games. So that just gives you a real quick overview of some of the games that I've worked on. There's quite a variety there. And when I formed Koolhaus, I based it on that we wanted to be platform agnostic, that we wanted to be diverse, and we wanted to be a very innovative company. And along with that diversity is a balance of contract work, original IP, and also self-publishing. I've heard in the last couple of days some comments of publishers and Apple and self-publishing and so on and so forth. I want to say to you that self-publishing is great. It allows all of us to get onto the iTunes store, but there will always be a need for publishers. What we don't have, even with successful independent developers, is that marketing angle. You need marketing to get your game out there. It's very difficult as a developer, as an independent developer, to market your own game. Very, very difficult. Marketing costs a lot of money. You need to have marketing people very specialized, and you need to spend a lot of money on marketing. Rule of thumb typically is for every dollar that you spend on development, you should be spending at least $4 on marketing. Now, that may become a bit of a surprise for some of you, but that's the reality. That's what you're competing with. So there'll always be a need for publishers out there, and don't ignore that. So let's get into development of Madden, NFL 2011 on iPad. And it's going to be a bit of a case study. And the game itself, basically, it broke every single record in its first week. It simultaneously was #1 on the games chart, as well as the all apps chart. No game has ever done that before or after. It broke unit sales records, as well as revenue records as well. So it was quite amazing for us. It was the studio's first #1, which is a tribute to the team that we have at Koolhaus. And we're all very excited about it and very happy the way it turned out. Great reviews. It was both critically and commercially well received. So, but this great success is wonderful, and we definitely did a lot of things right, obviously, or else the game would not have been that well received. But we also had some issues that we had to deal with, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So you might ask, well, how does a company like Koolhaus get a gig like this? How do we rate being in that lucky situation of working on an established title like this that has sold many millions every year on console and elsewhere? How do we get this particular project? Well, we'd already worked with EA for a number of years on Madden, as well as NCAA football. And both NCAA football and Madden share the same code base. And obviously, they're both a similar sport. And so because the team was very familiar with that code base, they chose us to develop the iPad version of this SKU. We had never developed an iPad game, brand new. Matter of fact, one of the challenges that we faced here in Canada is that you couldn't buy an iPad in Canada when we started development. And luckily, I have an American wife and a U.S. Mailing address, and also a U.S. iTunes account. And so as soon as they got iPads for sale in the U.S., I put my orders in, drove down to Seattle, and bought as many iPads as I could possibly buy so that we could start actually having the hardware in our hands. The tricky thing, as you'll see later with regards to when we go through some of the pitfalls, was that we had to start development 6 weeks before we actually had an iPad. And so that was one of the trials and tribulations of this particular project. So a brief word about our process internally at Koolhaus that we use on a regular basis. This is called Critical Stage Analysis, or CSA. And it's a bit different than post-mortem. Basically, it's about what we did right, what we did wrong, and the solutions that come along the way throughout development.
So it's really enhanced a supercharged postmortem. I'm sure everybody knows what postmortems are, right? Right? So at the end of a project, what happens traditionally in the industry, both games and software, is that you look back and you find out, you talk about what you did right, talk about what you did wrong, and then you kind of document that and then hope that the next project you don't make the same mistakes. There's lots of issues with that process. And it's done at the end of a project. People have forgotten what they did previously. In a console project, it might be 2 years of development. And people might no longer be at the company, they're off on holidays, whatever the case may be. There's lots of issues with postmortems. So at Koolhaus, we don't do postmortems. Our CSA process is every month, at least. It's every milestone. And we talk about and we document what we did right, what we didn't do right, and also the solutions for those things that we didn't do right. And then we have accountability for people to fix those things that we haven't done right over that past month or that past milestone. And along the way, it helps the project improve. And we use that on the Madden project as well. If you're interested in more details about that process, go to Gamasutra. I'm sure all of you know Gamasutra. It's probably the best online site for anything and everything about video games. And just do a search for either my name or critical stage analysis. An article that I published on Gamasutra is there for you to follow up. And if you have questions about it, by all means, shoot me an email. So we're going to talk about, first of all, is what we did right, because we want to celebrate our successes. And obviously, having a #1 game, we obviously did something right, and we need to be proud of that particular fact, and absolutely that is the case. There are other things that we did right as well. There are some cool features, total defensive control as well as hot routes. How many of you have played Madden on the iPad or elsewhere? So you're familiar with some of the features, great, excellent. And definitely some cool features. We also came up with, and it's not out on this version that's out there right now, but something called Vintage Voltage, which is a throwback to the old tabletop electronic football games. And that's coming out in the next version. And today, I'm actually going to show you some screen grabs of that game. So you're getting a scoop. Nobody else outside of Koolhaus and EA has seen this game, and you are going to have a first today. So that'll be at the end of the talk. So we shipped a high-quality, good-looking game. The reviews were really, really positive. Generally 8 out of 10 across the board. Stunning visuals, all those kinds of comments. We designed the Vintage Voltage game from scratch. This game had some challenges. It was using an existing code base that, yes, we had worked with in the past, but you don't get into all of the nooks and crannies of a code base on every single project. So it was technically called a port, but in reality it was an enhanced port, because we also developed Vintage Voltage football from scratch, our own code, our own design, our own art, etc., etc. And so it was a combination of those two. We designed that and built it in a very short time frame. Basically, we did Vintage Voltage in 3 months, which is pretty quick. And the team is very proud of that. And also, we completely redesigned the UI system and the front end for the iPad. There's nothing for us to base anything on in developing the UI. And obviously, UI is very important on the iPad, because we're talking about a big screen. It's touch screen based. And it's very important that the user experience is a positive one with that big screen and that touch interface. It's one thing to have an iPhone with a small screen. It's a very different thing to have a very big screen, and that's touch screen. We had no other games that we could base anything on. No research, so on and so forth.